Hola and welcome to a new episode of the Roofless Dog and Pony Show, episode 79. We've been very busy lately. We just came back from an amazing painting retreat in the UK, and this is our first painting collection after this incredible experience, amazing retreat that we had. So we are excited to get back into our regular practice. We propose these themes based on inspiration and current events, and we dedicate a couple of weeks, sometimes more, to work on paintings that are inspired by a theme we propose. And also, this is essentially the theme that we bring up every time we host a painting session during the next couple of weeks. My name is Julio Panisello. I am the Dream Alchemist at Roofless Painters. I'm going to sort of read a little bit of the introduction so we allow people to join us on the live. Thanks for being here, by the way, if you're here already. So with each episode, what we're trying to do is, again, just propose or reveal the theme of our next painting collection, so you can find out what will we be painting next and also the reason why. We explain where the theme, the concept comes from and how it relates to our contemporary time. And we also present or provide an opportunity to explore different possibilities for visual representation of the theme. And for that, we use images of paintings throughout art history as inspiration, and also, again, as a chance to provide stylistic and historical references. So we have a few paintings, not that many, but we're excited to propose something for this next collection that it's tied with the protests that have started in Iran at in the end of September and have expanded around the world. So we have listened, we have seen, we have read. Our social media is flooded with hashtags, with images, with videos of the protests, of the murder of Mahsa Amini. And we were in the UK when that happened, and we got back. We want to take this opportunity to present or propose a theme that's related with this important event that means more. The protests mean more than the geographical location, essentially. Let me just kind of go over a little bit more and see if a couple more people join. But so as you can tell, based on the presentation already, nothing is prepared or scripted. We sort of get a couple of ideas and images, and then we go with the flow. So you'll notice that sometimes it's messy, unpredictable, and what we like to call it, unvarnished. So you can find the episodes after the live on Instagram. Also, you can find all the episodes on our YouTube channel, Roofless Painters. We have a ton of videos right there that are free. And also you can find some of the presentations on a podcast form. As a podcast form in any podcast platform, you just have to type the Roofless Dog and Pony Show and you can listen to a bunch of episodes. But also, before I present the first image of a painting, you're welcome to contact us for any questions about this episode. Anything you can contribute, any notes, any comments. We're trying to learn and get educated and understand, and also we want to do this in support of all the people that we know that are pleading for voices to be heard, that and they're just telling that this time this is different, and that they hope that the murder of Mahsa Amini becomes the catalyst for change, not only in that country, but also in many countries around the world in which women's rights are being assaulted, lost. Violence against women keeps growing, and some scary trends are happening in different countries and societies that are not looking very good. So this is an important historical event, but also an opportunity to talk about these issues and make sure that we show where we stand, and also so we have a testimony of this important movement, and also we have a conversation about violence against women, the loss of women's rights throughout the world, essentially. So I just am gonna propose. Thank you. I'm not doing such a good job as you are, but I'm trying my best. Okay, so here we go. This is just going to sound, I'm going to try my best to put together different things, different things that hopefully will illustrate that this is not something that is happening right now and has never happened before. All right, so let me just kind of like bring a little bit of information. In the late days of September, the last week, Mahsa Amini was a Kurdish citizen who was visiting her brother in Iran, was arrested because she was supposedly wearing her hijab, which is mandatory in Iran and other countries, wrong. So there is a police force. I mean, people loosely call it police, but it's sort of like a tyrannical faction of the government in the country that their sole mission is to just target women for not wearing this piece of clothing properly. And targeting, it's a really benign word because there's a protocol. Women get arrested for not wearing it properly. This is something that after the 1979 revolution was imposed on the country almost overnight. A lot of people have died or they have been killed rather, because not only because of this, but many other reasons, including a lot of LGBTQ people living in the country being executed and put in jail. But anyhow, so she was arrested. She was with her family, with her brother, with her parents, and they were about to catch a train. And the police arrest her, and they tell their family that they just needed an hour in order to re-educate her how to properly wear this piece of clothing that has been imposed on women ever since 1979, not before. And girls after 7 years old are mandated to wear the minute they leave their homes. You cannot go to school if you don't wear that. You cannot get a job if you don't wear that. You cannot enter a public institution or a public place if you don't wear that. So I think it's important to kind of like pull the string a little bit and understand that this is not just a single murder, but it's a symbol of oppression, and also a turning point for people that are losing everything. I'm going to talk a little bit about the circumstances in the country. I'm going to keep this under 30 minutes, but anyhow, so the 1 hour arrest turned into 2 hours, and then the police came back and said that she was in the hospital, and she had a heart attack, and then she died. So the truth came out later. She was beaten. She was beaten in the head. There was a scan that was published was leaked by some people in the hospital, and it was clearly showing that she suffered injuries, head injuries. And before the announcement of the death, or at the same time, there were already people gathering in the hospital, apparently protesting. So authorities and people in the hospital claimed that she had a brain surgery when she was younger, and this was a consequence of the brain surgery. So the lies started to happen, and her father in particular just constantly sort of like protested, and more people gathered, and more witnesses sort of like showed exactly what happened. But from the government side, there were constant lies about the fact that the CT scan, for example, showed signs of psychological stress, which obviously a CT scan doesn't show psychological nothing. There were also these claims that she had an operation at the age of 5, and her father disputed her. So, classmates came in support saying that she never had surgery. So this all happened, and then on the 29th of September, an audio was released by a former commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is part of the government. And he claimed through reliable sources that the reason for Amini's death was an injury to her skull. So anyhow, when that happens on the 29th of September, the first protest happened outside of the hospital. It was immediate. People gathered, and then from that protest, they asked the family to bury her without any public and without any announcements, to do a quick funeral so protest would not spread. But which they did, but the protest spread, and we are here today. I think the protests are on week 3 or 3.5. Many countries in the world, many cities have joined, including here in Los Angeles. And many slogans have been, or chants have been put out. And one of them is Women, Life, and Freedom. And this is going to be the title of our collection. So this collection that we're going to start today and we're going to work on in the next 2 weeks is titled Women, Life, Freedom. Just one of the slogans that has been chanted by so many men and women in protest. So why am I showing this painting right here? This is a painting of a portrait of Dora Carrington. And Dora Carrington was a British artist who lived early 20th century. And the reason why I'm showing this, we're trying to connect the concept with some paintings. And by the way, the proposal is that we paint, we use images of women cutting their hair, because that's one of the forms of protesting. So we're going to do portraits of women cutting their hair. I'm going to talk a little bit, if I have time, about why women in Iran are cutting their hair, and why other women around the world are also cutting their hair in protest, not only for the death of Mahsa Amini, but also to bring awareness to violence against women and the laws of human rights, especially the laws of rights of personhood. This is all tied up with the recent laws of right to their own body, with the abortion ruling a few weeks ago or a couple of months ago, that essentially relegated women to second-class citizens. So this is a catalyst for more than just what's happening or has been happening in Iran. But anyhow, we've just been reading This Dark Country, a book by Rebecca Birrell, in which she is describing the life of 10 female artists at the beginning of the 20th century in the UK. They were part of the Bloomsbury group. And the book starts with biographical account of Dora Carrington. And we brought this painting because Dora Carrington went to art school with other women that were privileged enough at the time to go to art school, which wasn't that easy for women to go to. And as a sign of rebellion, she chopped her hair. She cut her hair short. This was an act of rebellion. This was unheard of. This was really a form of protest. And she had many of her friends in art school who also cut their hair in support. So the idea of cutting your hair or someone's hair as a form of protest is not new. It has happened many times throughout art history, throughout history, I would say. But specifically, I'm going to bring some paintings of women artists on the early 20th century that did portraits of them, or self-portraits, or other people did portraits of them with their hair being short. Something that demolished canons of beauty at the time, in which women were supposed to conform to this idea of beauty by wearing things in a specific way. And ultimately, it's all related. We think it's all related because it's about control of someone else's body, or not having control of your own body. So cutting your hair in a style that doesn't conform to societal rules, it's a way of protesting against not having control over your own decisions, essentially. So this has happened again. Specifically, we just bring up this paintings because we are just reading the book, and these artists were named or nicknamed the crop heads. Specifically, they were known at the time just because, as a sign of solidarity, they all decided to cut their hair short. And this is an excuse to talk about the protests, some forms of protest in Iran and in other countries in which women are cutting their hair in order to show solidarity to what's happening to women in Iran in particular, in the Middle East, in parts of Asia, and also around the world, in which women are facing more violence and also loss of rights. I'm going to bring up the proposal since we have more people joining the live. I'm going to bring up the proposal again. We are going to do portraits of women cutting their hair, and we're using specifically image references from images online that people have been posting with hashtags. Just yesterday, it was yesterday or maybe a couple of days ago, three French actresses, three important French actresses showed solidarity with the protest by cutting their hair. Isabelle Huppert, Juliette Binoche, and Marion Cotillard. They just did a video, and they just they cut their hair, and then specifically mentioned that they did it in solidarity of this movement. So I'm just going to read like a couple of articles that we've been able to gather, but essentially for many Iranian women, cutting off hair, it's a sign of protest because hair, it's a symbol of beauty, and also it's a symbol of beauty that is now being, or not now, but recently being imposed to cover with the hijab. So loss of control of their bodies, and also not being able to express themselves. But the fact that this is literally killing women's lives in Iran. So they are cutting their hair off to just show that, the imposition of this piece of clothing to cover a symbol of beauty is, it's not right. Anyhow. So I'm quoting like different voices. We want to show them that we don't care about their standards, their definition of beauty, and what they think what we should look like. Again, this idea of transgressing personhood and someone telling you what you should look like, what you should wear, and how you should express your own identity. It's also a symbol to show how angry and sad they are. In our literature, I'm quoting someone else. In Iranian literature, cutting the hair is a symbol of mourning and sometimes a symbol of protesting, which I think in this case, it kind of like specifically means both, mourning for the loss of Mahsa Amini and also as a sign of protest for her murder. If we can cut our hair to show that we are angry, we will do it. Just bits and pieces. The practice of cutting someone's hair or cutting your hair as a symbol of protest is cited in Shahnameh, a 1,000-year-old Persian epic and cultural mainstay in Iran, written by Ferdowsi, one of the most important works of literature in the Persian language. In more than one instance, through the epic work, hair is plucked in an act of mourning. Also, women cutting their hair is an ancient Persian tradition. When the fury is stronger than the power of the oppressor, you cut your hair as protest. The moment we have been waiting for has come. Politics fueled by poetry. So I love this intersection of politics and art, politics and poetry, and the idea that what's fueling this protest, it's an ancient tradition based in an art form. So I think that's really inspiring and beautiful, and that's why we are going to do portraits of women cutting their hair, women specifically, now during this time. This is another portrait, and again, I'm jumping from geographical location and also contemporary time to a different time in which a group of women also showed protesting, or they protested against canons of beauty by cutting their hair short at a time when women were not supposed to do it. So this is a portrait of Barbara Hills Bagenal. She was a British artist as well, friends of Dora Carrington, and this is a portrait by Ray Strachy. It was painted in the 1920s, and this between the 1910s and the 1920s, these women that went to Slade Art School in London, they found support for each other, and also they reivindicated their standing, their position, their identity, not only in the art school, but also in society. So another example of a portrait of a woman with a short hair, just giving you stylistic references and ideas on how this has been done before that are not specifically conforming to a canon of beauty, just to show you that what's important here is just to do it, to express yourself and do a representation of the concept, regardless of what you think that representation looks like compared to whatever. So that's the reason why we propose, or we kind of like show images of paintings that have different styles in order to inspire anyone who wants to join and do this or contribute to this collection with a painting of a woman cutting their hair. And by the way, we have compiled images of that we've seen on social media of women cutting their hair because of the protest, and we're gonna use those images as references. So, and going back to the tradition or the roots of this form of protest, the practice is also common in other ancient cultures. The epic of Gilgamesh, a 3,500-year-old poem from ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, covers themes of grief and despair, where cutting or pulling out one's hair is used to express anguish. So another cultural reference preceding contemporary time in which the cutting of the hair symbolizes an emotional state of mind and expression. There are many examples throughout literature and within texts that are fundamental for the identity of a society, a country, and a culture in which illustrations of women pulling their hair out or cutting their hair are described as part of or as a manifestation of this idea of protesting or anguish or mourning. So, and then finally, I have only a few minutes. Another voice of another woman protesting right now, saying, and by the way, I think she is Shima, an Iranian activist who lives in Belgium, and she says that hair cutting has had always historical meaning for Iranians. Women who lose a direct relative would sometimes cut their hair as a sign of mourning and anger, she said. So a lot of women consider Mahsa Amini their sister. So protesting the murder of Mahsa Amini by cutting their hair shows not only support for women's rights and also opposition to oppression, but it's a form of solidarity with her and her family. And it communicates this idea that she's our sister, we are her sisters. So I think that's also important and interesting, because sometimes we see images on social media that we're not able to stitch together to proper contextual meaning, what that protest means, why people are doing it, why there have been so many women killed, specifically in Iran, but in other countries that have been victims of gender violence. But why this time right now, and why her, and why are people sort of like protesting so much this time? So sometimes I feel like things get lost in the scrolling. We barely dedicate time to understand or educate ourselves, and we expect others to do that job, which is not a good sign of allyship, by the way. So so hopefully this has been a good way of putting things in perspective and showing why this is important. And also we want to kind of like add our little grain of support by proposing portraits of women cutting their hair. We have downloaded images of women protesting and then just cutting their hair, and I think it would be a good premise to just practice portraiture, but at the same time a good reminder of right now what's happening. And so cutting hair, said Tashi, another person who's quoted in this article, is itself a ceremony of mourning to better expose the depth of suffering at the loss of a loved one. And in today's context, she adds, it's a sign of protest against the killing of our people. So it's not just something that has no meaning. It's something that has a deep, deep ancestral meaning. And we're titling our... Oh, let me just show a couple more. This is another portrait of... her name is Alex Strachy. Alex Strachy was a psychoanalyst, and she also was a student at the Slade School of Art in London at the same time that Dora Carrington was there. She was also part of the group also known as the Crop Heads, a group of women that decided to cut their hair short at the beginning of the 20th century to break down what femininity should look like. So their premise was obviously different. The premise was it was a form of protest, but it was a form of breaking down gender norms at the time. Women didn't have that much access to art school, even though we're talking the beginning of the 20th century. So only privileged women and women who lived near or close by art schools had a chance, if anyone had one, I guess. Sorry. So when we learn about the tradition of cutting the hair short for specific reasons. We remembered this group of artists who did it for a different reason, but somehow connected. And finally, just wanted to mention another excerpt from another article. Hold on one second. Let me see. I know that this is long, but this will be my final read, and see if I can just so essentially there is another article. MSNBC tries to kind of like bring another fold, indicating the reasons why this is spreading, and this is galvanizing. The word galvanizing keeps coming up again and again. I think there's also frustration about losing rights and increasing violence against women, and that it permeates through societies around the world. And I feel like this was a catalyst for the anger and the frustration and the injustice that a lot of people in different societies, countries, levels, and experience in their everyday. So, and specifically in Iran, inflation is driving up the price of food while people are making less, and unemployment is in double digits. So the economical situation in the country is precarious, would be an understatement. It's really bad. That, coupled with the death of Mahsa, the Iranian government continuing to isolate the country while suppressing women, has driven the Iranian people to the brink, where the threat of retaliation from the police may not matter this time. Many Iranians I have spoken to say that at this point they have nothing else to lose. So if we're going to do this, we're going to talk a little bit more about it, and maybe just kind of like hear other stories perhaps. But if you feel, if you've seen images on your social media, and if you feel like you quite don't understand what's going on, and you sort of like, prefer to sort of like scroll, or you feel conflicted that maybe you want to do something about it, but you don't know how. So we invite you to join us. We're going to paint together portraits of women cutting their hair. We're going to also use the images to post on social media, and using the hashtags that have been used to maintain the momentum, to also show support as well, not only for people in Iran that are protesting, but for so many family members and friends that we have that are desperate to for their voices to be heard. The plead of people that we know and love, that have been traumatized over years for this injustice, and suffering the consequences of this regime. It's palpable and it's close, and it hits really close to us. By the way, it's not just hitting close to us. The hashtag Mahsa Amini got retweeted 80 million times, which is a Twitter record. So it's not just a small group of schoolgirls trying to protest photographs of the dictator. It's a lot of people that feel like this is an important issue, and maybe things will change this time, but we'll do our part. So thank you so much. We hope you join us. We start the webinar. We start the collection with a webinar tomorrow. Everyone's invited. You don't have to have specific art materials. You can do it with a piece of paper and a pencil if you want to. It's a conversation. At the same time, we try to walk people through the steps. It's all very safe in the privacy of your home. You're not invited to talk, or you don't have to show what you're doing. So if you've ever wanted to join and experience the amazing creative energy that happens when we get together and we do something, we create something together, you could join safely and without any obligation. So it's only $20 and it's 3 hours. We paint for 2 hours, and then we sort of like have a conversation for 1 hour about progress. We share what we've done. If people want to, it's voluntary to share. But yeah, so thank you so much. And this will be amazing. We're so excited. Thank you.